Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful August the 22nd, 2019. Grondo Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, we got a blissful night in sports. We got Major League Baseball, tons of it on the mound tonight, Charlton. We got preseason baseball, football. It's Thursday Night Madness once again, and the FedEx Cup is going on down in Atlanta in golf.
Atlanta is a happening city. I hear not only do they have the biggest airport as far as traffic in the United States of America, but they're getting all the good golf courses too, Big C. They got to send some more of that golf course water and green out to California. And also, whoa, Canada, look out for the Raiders. They're coming to town. In fact, that game is already underway up in beautiful Canada. There's a lot going on in sports. And I just want to say, for all the people out there excited about football, it's just a couple of days away. But I really want to know, how is that? Did you say marinade, or what do you do again before you cook the meat? Big C, your thoughts?
Oh, Charlton, you got to throw that marinade on it, that dry rub, and let it sit in the fridge for a few days, Charlton.
Yeah.
So all of that great flavoring, everything will matriculate itself down through the meat and help tenderize it before you put it out there in the smoker. And you put it out there on that low smoker, Charlton, for about 8 to 10 hours.
Yeah.
And when you pull it out, Charlton, it's also succulent and moist and ready to just melt in your mouth.
Oh my God! It sounds something like the White House might do over the weekend too. Big C, it's all fair love and war. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you. I just want to say there's so much happening in sports. From high school kicking off tomorrow with the USA Today top-ranked high school football team in the country. Allegedly, they're saying St. Thomas Aquinas out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and they're taking on California's Northern Power, De La Salle of Concord. Looking forward to that. Of course, Miami kicks off also down south with their state rival, so we'll look forward to it. But I want to start tonight. I want to take a look, and there's so many things to get into. I want to take a look at some of the top quarterbacks in college football history. It's our belief. Everybody has their own opinion. But would you believe, they say big things can come in small packages. Kellen Moore, Boise State quarterback, he became the first quarterback in FBS history to win 50 games in his career, leading the Boise State Broncos to 4 straight Western Athletic Conference championships, and he was named the WAC Conference Player of the Year 3 years in a row. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Kellen Moore and the Boise State Broncos, Charleston, burst onto the national scene when Chris Peterson was the coach there. They were known as the Cinderellas of college football. We talked about that great game that they played down in the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma.
That's right.
Jared Zabransky brought the team from behind for that miraculous overtime win. But when you think about Kellen Moore and all the great quarterbacks in college football history, Charlton,
yeah,
he was the first to win 50 collegiate starts. When you think about that and you go over the 150 years that college football has ever been played, Kellen Moore is on top of the list as far as the most victories all time for a starting quarterback in college football.
That's amazing. And you think about Boise, it's such a small city. I think it has about less than 300,000 in the metropolitan area, but they're always getting some of the best athletes in the country to come there. And here's another guy. We talk about, big things can come in small packages, Boise State being in a small media market, Big C. And then we go to a large media market, the number 4 in the country. You look at John Elway, Stanford University. By the time he left Palo Alto down on the farm, would you believe that Elway was the owner of almost every Pac-10 record at that time for passing and offense? In general, he was named the Pac-10 Player of the Year 2 separate times. Big C, your thoughts?
When you think about how great John Elway was as a collegiate and as a pro, but he played in a conference, Charlton, that he could never dominate. I mean, just like the early part of his NFL career. You think about all the great teams that were in the Pac-10 at that time.
Yeah.
You know, we talked about that memorable game, the big game with Cal when the band
Stanford
was on the field.
That's right.
But he had to go up against USC every year, Charlton, when they were in their heyday. He also had to go up against teams like Cal that had risen to prominence, as well as going against UCLA that we always knew was a power in
That's
the Pac-10. And Washington had risen to great heights. But John Elway was a superior player on an excellent team at Stanford.
And also a benefit, his father, Jack Elway, was actually his coach. So not only, he was one of the only players in the country, when practice ended is when he went to bed, Big C, not when he ended the team practice. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, to have your dad as a coach, and Jack Elway was a tremendous coach, Charlton, a great developer of talent of young men.
Yep.
And to have his father there to be able to scrutinize and teach him in every step of the process,
Yep.
Charlton, to get him to the level, and we know where he's risen to as a professional. He's in the NFL Hall of Fame.
Oh, definitely. Amazing high school and college as well as NFL player. There's another thing. Big packages come in small packages. Or is it small packages come in big packages? Whatever is big. The Hawaiian Islands are not very big, Big C. But quarterback Timmy Chang from Hawaii, he, by the time he left the University of Hawaii in 2004, he had become the most prolific passer in college football history. Big C, he had 17,072 yards through the air, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, you think about Timmy Chung and what he produced out there on the big island of Hawaii, Charlton. You know, a lot of the East Coast people and even West Coast people didn't get a chance to see Timmy play because of the time that Hawaii kicked off their games out there in the islands. But, you know, you're talking about an electrifying offense out there, Charlton. He was led by June Jones, who was his coach, running that run-and-shoot offense. And June was the original quarterback to run that run-and-shoot offense under Mouse Davis at Portland State out there in Oregon, Charlton.
Yeah.
But when you think about Timmy Chang, they also had a quarterback that ended up in Hawaii after him named Colt Brennan.
Yep.
And when you think about those two quarterbacks, Charlton, they combined for more yards than any two quarterbacks in college football history that played at the same university. They combined for over 32,000 yards passing between those two quarterbacks.
That's amazing. And to go out on the island, there's a lot of good football teams over in Hawaii, and no matter whether they come from the mainland or from Hawaii, they really throw the football a lot, Big C. There's another guy down on the farm, and just think about some of the guys I'm talking about from the West Coast. They play at the most difficult academic school as well. You think about Andrew Luck of Stanford. Before he arrived at Stanford, they'd never won more than 10 games in a season, and the great Andrew Luck led them to 12 wins in 2010. They had even knocked off mighty USC during Pete Carroll's heyday. And think about this. He had them 2 consecutive years. They had 18 wins before him. He took them to 23 wins in those seasons of 2010 and 2011. And he did it at a school that you had to study. You had to actually go to class, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you had to be accepted to get into that school at Stanford. And you think about it, there's a common theme out there.
Yeah.
We talked about the great John Elway that played at Stanford.
Yeah.
Then came, and he couldn't get the job done, but then came Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
You think about the heights that he took that program to, and you think about it, Charlton. You play in the Pac-12 conference.
Yeah.
You have 10 wins, and you don't even win the conference.
Yeah.
You don't even compete for the national championship.
Yeah.
That's how dominant. And that was during an era when USC and Pete Carroll were in a dynasty out there in the West Coast.
Well, Big C, I want to just take a pause because to have a Southern guy say to the universe that the Pac-12 shouldn't have to play every conference team, and maybe we'll get some teams in the College Bowl playoffs, Big C. Landry Jones, Oklahoma, the most overlooked quarterback in the Big 12 history. Jones, the career for his record, his total in offense for the Big 12. Think about this guy, 16,646 yards, Big C, and people still don't think of Oklahoma as a passing school, Big C. Your thoughts?
You know, they had such an illustrious history as a running school, Charlton. You think about some of the great running backs that played at Oklahoma.
Oh.
Steve Owens won the Heisman Trophy. You had Joe Washington, who had a stellar career at Oklahoma and in the pros. The great Billy Sims, Charlton, Marcus Dupree. Barry Switzer had a wealth of running backs there at Oklahoma, but then all of a sudden Landry Jones came along, you know, under Bob Stoops. And here's a guy who put up phenomenal numbers in the Big 12. We've seen what Kyler Murray has done. We've seen what Baker Mayfield has done. But when you talk about the totality of the numbers,
Yep.
Landry Jones, 16,000 yards passing, Charlton.
Amazing.
Whoever thought that a Big 12 quarterback would have amassed that many yards?
Well, it's almost like you just don't expect it, and I think that's why they've been so good at recruiting players over the years. They've always gotten guys to come there and just play into that system, no matter what that system was. And you think about talking about the West Coast again, and I hear so many people talking about who's going to play in the college football championship game, the top 4 teams. But sometimes you go back into history and you find a great conference. Jim Plunkett, also Stanford University, down on the farm, Big C. Now, Plunkett was the winner of the 1970 Heisman Trophy Award. This is a guy who also led the Pac-10 in passing during his senior season. Plunkett led the Cardinals to their first Rose Bowl appearance, and they subsequently upset the heavily favored Ohio State Buckeyes. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Jim Plunkett, Charlton, is the greatest overlooked quarterback on both levels, in college as well as in the NFL. But you think about it, he led Stanford to their first Rose Bowl victory ever over the mighty Ohio State during that time under Woody Hayes.
Yep.
But Jim Plunkett was a guy who played against all odds, and you think about what he rose to. And he was all-time leading passer and held most passing records when he left Stanford, Charlton, after winning the Heisman Trophy.
It's amazing that we talk about players that have gotten into a position to be voted into the Hall of Fame. He happens to have a Heisman Trophy, but maybe they don't know that he also has 2 Super Bowl trophies, Big C. It's a shame that he's not in, but I think he'll get in somehow. They'll set it up. Here's a player, sticking to the West Coast, I think one of the most dominant players I ever saw. And in high school, he was on the All-State baseball team in California, which is the largest state in the Union. And then as a college football player, Colin Kaepernick, the University of Nevada, Reno at the time, his senior season rolled around, he became the first quarterback in NCAA history to rush for 4,000 yards and pass for 10,000 yards. And you think about what he did, he stopped Boise State's 3 consecutive seasons of winning the WAC title. Here's a guy that's been not only one of the most dominant players on the scene of college football, he still holds the record for the most yards in one game in the NFL by a quarterback in the playoffs. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you talked about Kellen Moore opening up the program, Charlton, with his 50 victories.
Yep.
The most ever by a starting quarterback in college football. He and Colin Kaepernick had to go against each other for 4 years in college,
right.
Nevada versus Boise State, Charlton.
Yeah.
You talk about some epic battles between 2 quarterbacks. Colin Kaepernick did not take a back seat in college to Kellen Moore. And as you talked about it, as a senior, Boise State was 12-0, poised to go, Charlton, into the bowl playoff series. And yet they ran up to a tough, stalwart team in Nevada where Colin Kaepernick made the difference in that game and stopped Boise's unbeaten streak and knocked them out of the playoff series. And, the rest was history for Colin Kaepernick. We know what he did in the NFL, but when you talk about being the first quarterback on a collegiate level to rush for 4,000 yards and to pass for 10,000 yards in his career, Charlton, what a phenomenal feat.
And that was also a season where I saw Nevada put up 51 points on Cal Berkeley up in Nevada, so people can't say, well, the competition is not the same. They put 51 points on Cal, the most points anyone scored against them at that season. Also, let's go down south where you are so them good old boys don't start getting restless, Big C. You know how Southern guys can get restless. Peyton Manning, University of Tennessee. It's amazing to think that someone with such a resume, Peyton Manning with his father Archie giving him tutelage, Big C, talked about Jack Elway and John Elway earlier. He not only never won a national championship while at the University of Tennessee, but he also did not win a Heisman Trophy, but won every other postseason award in the great John Elway. Big C, your thoughts?
Peyton Manning. John Elway did it all at the University of Tennessee, Charlton. Under Philip Foreman down there, he brought that program back from the ashes. He started as a true freshman down there.
And Peyton Manning.
Saw some of the greatest games in college football that he participated in.
Yeah.
Everyone thought that he would win the Heisman Trophy as a senior. Rod Woodson, the defensive back from Michigan, went on to win that acclaim, Charlton.
Yeah.
But when you think about all the other offensive individual awards that a player could win in their college career,
Peyton Manning won them.
Peyton Manning had them all except for the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, I mean he did a lot down there, the good old boys in the South. But when I think about John Elway and Peyton Manning, they both remind me of the NFL's prodigal quarterback. They have the same look, that the NFL's always looked for. They both have won Super Bowls, and ironically, they were both coached by their dads, and then Elway ended up being able to tutelage. I guess you could say he gave him some tutelage when he brought in Manning to the Denver Broncos. Big C, talk about that relationship from their father both coaching them, giving them some tutelage over the years, and then ended up on the same team. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's one of the things, not just in football. We talk about that also all the time, having fathers in the home, teaching kids the right thing, having that rites of passage in life. There's nothing like having a dad in the home
that's right.
teaching a son the rights of life, Charlton. And that's what both of those great young quarterbacks had, Charlton. They had the dad in the home.
Yeah.
We always talk about athletes and getting off track, being misguided.
Yeah.
People living through them vicariously. These were two successful men that did not have to live through their children, Charlton, but teach their children the way to perform as athletes and be respectable as young men.
Yeah, it's always good to see those stories, Big C. Ken Dorsey, University of Miami, the U, while the 2011 Hurricanes, they may have been the greatest college football team of all time, but you cannot overlook Dorsey's performance. 38-2 as a starter in 3 seasons, and he threw 76 touchdown passes. This is a kid out of California. We're still seeing that trend. Why are so many kids leaving California? And he left in the heyday of the Pac-12, playing for Rose Bowl championships. But he went south to Miami, and he set records for them. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, if you look at that time, Charlton, when Ken Dorsey went to Miami, Miami had the greatest program in college football.
Yeah.
And if you were a young man playing quarterback, you knew the quickest path to the NFL is that if you could become a starter with the University of Miami Hurricanes and that pro talent that they had surrounding the quarterback on the offensive line at the receiving position and running back, that you had a chance to catapult yourself into that career. Ken Dorsey went on to have a decent NFL career with the Dallas Cowboys and San Francisco 49ers, Charlton. He never reached the heights that he did at the University of Miami.
Right.
But as a trigger man in that offense, Charlton, he showed all the poise to direct those great athletes.
He may have had a better talent at Miami than in the NFL, Big C. I'm not even joking about that. Marcus Mariota, another young man from the islands. He came out of St. Louis High School in Honolulu, Hawaii, went on to the University of Oregon. The Hawaiian-born quarterback, he played in Chip Kelly's fast-paced system, that offense that he had up there, like snap the ball every 12 seconds or whatever. But Mariota threw for a staggering 105 touchdowns. He also ran for 29 more touchdowns. He did this in 3 seasons playing for the University of Oregon Ducks, and he won the 2014 Heisman Trophy in a landslide. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that was one of the more amazing offenses to watch in the history of college football, Charlton. I thought when I saw the warehouse down in the University of Houston with Andre Ware playing quarterback and David Klingler, that offense in college football would not get more exciting.
Right.
But when Chip Kelly installed his offense up at the University of Oregon, the Ducks were off and flying, Charlton. And Mariota was the perfect quarterback for that scheme that they ran up there. He was elusive. He was fast, Charlton. He had a rocket quick release. And he got the job done. Although he fell short in a national championship game against Auburn, he still won the Heisman Trophy in a landslide.
Yeah, the guy has always been a dominant player. I think that was Ohio State that got the best of him. But it's the same thing. They're just a dominant team in Oregon. I think they have that same kind of team this year. We will see. Pat White, University of West Virginia. White was a revolutionary dual-threat quarterback, and he's the only quarterback to start winning 4 bowl games, including 2 BCS games, ending his career as the all-time NCAA rushing quarterback. People wouldn't believe that, Big C. Your thoughts?
You think in today's game, Pat White would be a superstar. He was a diminutive African-American quarterback, Charlton, who played at University of West Virginia.
Yep.
He was drafted by the Miami Dolphins when they tried to implement the Wildcat offense in the NFL. That was the same offense that Colin Kaepernick ran with the San Francisco 49ers. They didn't have the personnel at the time to execute that offense.
That's right.
They tried Pat White as a receiver later on. But he had the ability to play in the NFL as a quarterback. But at West Virginia, Charlton, he set the trend for what was to come in today's modern quarterback on the college football level when you look at the dual threat. He was Michael Vick before Michael Vick on the college football level.
I agree. He was a very dominant player, and people just got to know about it. And that's why when we say certain things, all we ask is that people Google it. Everybody has their own flavor. Everybody says we're going to bring on, some guy who's going to tell you things. We want you to read it for yourself. Read it for yourself by Googling. Google this: Jim McMahon, BYU. Over the course of his career, think about how great he was. At the school, McMahon threw for 9,536 yards in 84 touchdown passes, not including bowl games, where he left for the NFL and held 70 NCAA records and tied for another. That's Jim McMahon, BYU. Big C, your thoughts?
The punky QB from the Chicago Bears, before he got to Chicago, he was a very profanity-laden quarterback at BYU, the Mormon school.
Mormon school.
And he said things on the field that even makes the officials scared. But you think about Lavelle Edwards' offense out there at Charlton in the great state of Utah.
In Provo, Utah,
This was a pass-happy conference and a pass-happy team. The quarterbacks that Lavelle Edwards produced at BYU, Charlton, played some of the most exciting games in college football history. All of those BYU quarterbacks, Charlton, set records in the Holiday Bowl out in San Diego. Used to be played on New Year's Day. Well, Christmas Eve night out in San Diego. And Jim McMahon, at the time when he played, he was one of those record holders, Charlton.
Yeah, he had a mouth like John Gruden or a mouth like Jackie Gleason. So when they start doing DNA tests, you may wonder who he finds in his background, the way he spoke. He and Mike Ditka had a hard time getting along in Big C, but it's all fair and love and war. Danny Werfel, another Southern boy, University of Florida, down in Gainesville. He completed 708 of 1,170 passes for 10,875 yards and 14 touchdowns, oftentimes passing through hurricanes. He set SEC records while piling up the second most passing yards in major college football history. The two-time All-American went on to win the Heisman Trophy. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he ran that fun gun offense under the great Steve Spurrier down in Florida, Charlton. People forget how great a team Florida had prior to Urban Meyer showing up down there, Charlton, under Steve Spurrier. When you look at the quarterbacks he had down there, Shane Matthews, Danny Werfel, Charlton, he had Heisman Trophy winners, he had running backs, he had it all at Florida. And when you think about Danny Werfel and what he produced down there, Charlton, he didn't have a rocket for an arm, Charlton, but he was so salient at quarterback and understanding what the defensive schemes was, he would throw the ball to where he knew the receivers were going to be and led this team to a national championship.
Yeah, they had great timing. I love seeing how they would always throw the ball, and they knew whether the receiver had to break. The ball was going to be there whether the receiver broke or not. And they had some great teams and great talent back in the day. Another great quarterback. And they're all going to, again, everybody has their own opinion. I'm sure if you're from the South, you think all the Southern guys are better. If you're from the West Coast, you may think all the West Coast. If, the Northeast, the same thing. Ty Detmer out of BYU, another one of Lavelle Edwards' guys. He was the winner of the 1990 Heisman Trophy. Ty Detmer finished his college career 59 NCAA records and tied for 3 others. In the 1989 Holiday Bowl against the mighty Penn State Nittany Lions, he set an NCAA record for the most passing yards, 576 passing yards, the most yards of total offense, 594, in a bowl game, Big C. And he also finished his college career 15,031 passing yards, 121 touchdowns. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it was a nightmare for many defensive backs playing in that conference. We talked about Jim McMahon.
Yeah.
He left BYU with 70 NCAA records. And here's Ty Detmer. He walked out. When they have an alumni gathering, I guess Jim McMahon can laugh at him. I got 59 records.
That's right.
I had 70. You think about that. You set 59 NCAA records while you're at your university, and that's not even the most in team history.
Yeah.
So, you have to give a lot of credit to Lavelle Edwards out there at BYU, one of the most underrated coaches in the history of college football. When you look at the talent that he produced at quarterback, Jonathan, this man produced several NFL starters at quarterback. And a lot of people don't remember the first NFL starter he produced was Greg Cook for the Cincinnati Bengals when they were an expansion franchise.
Yeah.
But, he went on. They had the one kid, Edwards, who played for the Raiders, big, long kid. You think about Young, you think about Detmer. Great quarterbacks to come out of that institution of BYU.
I know Steve Young doesn't have the records at BYU. Those other guys do, Big C. That's how good they were. Another great player, Sticking to the southern, I guess the southwest, Andre Ware, University of Houston, down in Texas. He turned down his dream university by not enrolling in the University of Texas because they wanted to convert him to a defensive back. He enrolled in nearby University of Houston, and he became one of the best quarterbacks in the country. He wrote college football records while playing in a run-and-shoot offense where, think about it, 4,699 yards, 44 touchdowns. As a junior, he set 26 records en route to winning the Heisman Trophy. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, and they named the stadium after him. They call it the Warehouse, Charlton. I mean, you talk about chucking the football up and down the field. That Houston program in the Southwest Conference at that time, Charlton, was completely electrifying. You knew that when you came in to watch the University of Houston Cougars play, you were going to see a light show.
Yeah.
Because Andre Ware was lighting it up every game, Charlton, and rose that program back from the ashes to national prominence.
Now, give me your thought, because, and I know sometimes we say, oh, it's about race, but think about it. If you're a head coach and you have a guy that, if you're pressing enough, you can see that he was going to win a Heisman Trophy, but they would rather have him as a defensive back. Just talk, if you can, about why it's important to stand up for yourself. He was going to go to Texas, but Texas says, no, we don't know if you can play quarterback. He was the best in the country, but Texas didn't see it. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, you have a history of playing certain type of players in certain positions when you're certain university. You think about the University of Texas at that time, Charlton. They'd never had an African-American quarterback.
No.
The first one they got was James Brown, and that was it.
Yeah.
Next to Vince Young, that wasn't the history of that program, Charlton. They were always known for great African-American quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But not just Andre Ware, Charlton. Many African-American quarterbacks. You think about the number of African-Americans in high school that have played quarterback through the Southeast, Charlton, and never got a chance to don that position when they were on the college level. They were always moved to another position, tight end, wide receiver, defensive back, even running back.
Yeah.
You think about Mitchell Robinson, who played quarterback for the Penn State Nittany Lions.
Yeah.
He ended up being a running back with the San Francisco 49ers and Seattle Seahawks.
Wow.
So you don't always get that opportunity when you're an African-American, Charlton, to be in that position. They say, well, you're such a great talent, we want to play you elsewhere. They never tell a white guy that.
Well, Lamar Jackson, they tried to do the same thing for the Baltimore Ravens, led them to the Super Bowl. Not to the Super Bowl, but he led them to the playoffs. And Joe Flacco, who led them to the Super Bowl, had to go find another city to play in because of a guy that they told you got to play defensive back. He said, no, I'm going to stick to my horns. And I love people who do that. Deshaun Watson, you think about this. Clemson, after taking the college football world by storm, his redshirt sophomore season, leading Clemson to the national championship game, that was 2015, where they lost by one score. And Watson and the Tigers returned. They were committed, Big C. They knew what it was like to get to the top. They came back to the biggest stage in college football the following year, and they knocked off the University of Alabama in the national title game. Now, in two of those games, this man amassed over 1,100 yards of total offense and accounted for 8 touchdowns, 7 passing and 1 rushing. And there's also talk that people wanted him to play defensive back. Based on your thoughts.
Well, when you think about the biggest stages, Deshaun Watson performed on that. I remember his coach, Dabo Swinney, said at the time he was the Michael Jordan of college football. And that when the lights came on, the star showed up.
Yeah.
And he did that back-to-back seasons, Charlton. When you think about the numbers that he amassed against Alabama in that loss in the previous season, you knew that Clemson had a star in quarterback Deshaun Watson.
Yeah.
But he was able to come back the following year, Charlton, and replicate that and put up even better numbers.
Yeah.
But he showed his fortitude, Charlton, because he came down on that game-winning drive, Charlton, with very little time left on the clock, and threw the pass to Mike Renfro for the game-winning touchdown to hoist the championship trophy for Clemson. Just the making of a great quarterback, Charlton, and he's gone on to the NFL and played just like he did in college.
It's the same thing, Big C. It's the same thing. You just got to stick to your horns. Case Keenum, University of Houston. Case Keenum didn't just rewrite the record books. He basically wrote his own books, Big C. And when he left the University of Houston in 2011, Keenum, he set so many NCAA records, and especially for that school, in virtually every passing category you can think of, including most completions, most career passing yards, most career touchdown passes in a game, and 300-plus yard games in a season. He had 4,000 and 5,000 yards passing, including 155 touchdown passes and another 23 rushing, Big C. He's still setting records. Your thoughts?
Well, Case Keenum, while he was at the University of Houston, we talked about Andre Ware.
Yeah.
Andre Ware parallel to what Case Keenum did. He set NCAA numbers, Charlton, that will never be touched. They always talk about, records are made to be broken.
Right.
He broke the record when he set the record. They won't be broken. Case Keenum put numbers up there. People always talk about pinball games. I think you guys got this game that you call Madden now that everybody plays.
Yeah, everybody plays it.
Everybody wants to be this professional athlete on a video game.
Yeah.
Case Keenum created video football.
Yeah.
He was electrifying, Charlton. He put up numbers that were shocking. And we talk about quarterbacks passing for 4,000 yards in a college season.
Yeah.
That was nothing for him because he went to the 5,000-yard plateau. You think about it, over a two-season span, Case Keenum passed for just under 10,000 yards as a college quarterback, Charlton, on to that great career that he had at Houston.
Yeah, he was amazing, Big C. And I love what's happening in sports. And what we're going to do is come up on what's called the Big C Timeout. Today is Thursday, but it sure feels like Friday because football's in the air. And when it's in the air, Big C, everybody's happier in life. And we want to come back and talk about more of the top quarterbacks and also a few other things in sports. And we hope that you'll come back with us after the Big C Timeout. All right, we are back after the Big C Timeout on the Big C Sports Network. And I'm so grateful. It's something to be grateful, Big C. I'm so grateful that we have Big C Sports Network. In fact, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, worldwide on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. Just say Google, play Big C Sports. You'll see it pop up. You can follow Big C Sports on YouTube. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. And you have a television in the home, go to Xfinity Comcast. You can follow Big C Sports on the iHeartRadio app. And what I really love is the app by Alexa. Say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate our sponsors for all their support. Big C down south where they get lots of thunder and lightning and hurricanes. One of the better storms that ever blew through that state, Tim Tebow, University of Florida. There have been many great college football players in recent years, but perhaps none of them have been more famous for many reasons as Tim Tebow. I remember Chris Leak was on the scene. Tim Tebow kind of kicked him to the side. The three-time All-American, two-time SEC Player of the Year, two-time BCS National Champion. He also won a Heisman Trophy, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Tim Tebow, Charlton, you think about what's good about a college athlete. He personified that. He was one of those guys without scandal, without any negative media,
That's right.
without his collegiate career. Said sometimes people said he was too damn good on and off the field,
Yeah.
And he throws a little dirt. One game he did have a little dirt in his face, Charlton, when they played Mississippi State and they lost the game, and he vowed that his team would not lose another game.
Yeah.
As a true leader, they didn't, Charlton. They went on to win a national championship.
Yeah.
But Tim Tebow was one of the greatest players, overall players that we ever saw on the college football level.
He was amazing, Big C. And now, this is another player that I think never really got a fair shake because he was such a dominant player. And we go down to the Plains, the great Tommy Frazier, University of Nebraska, Tom Osborne's finest. Think about what Tommy Frazier did. He led the University of Nebraska Cornhuskers to back-to-back national championships in 1994 and 1995. It's been almost a quarter century since any other quarterback had ever done so. And Frazier ended his career with a 45-win and 4-loss record, 5,476 total yards of offense, and 79 touchdowns. But he did it with the great Lawrence Phillips, the late Lawrence Phillips, in the backfield. And he did it with a team that was known for just like 3 yards in a cloud of dust. He really became that run play option quarterback before it was really giving credit. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, he also had a wide receiver who was the #1 player in the draft, Irving Fryer.
That's right.
Frazier was a tremendous quarterback, Charlton. When you think about, he was Tim Tebow before Tim Tebow.
He was.
But as you talked about, a quarterback that was able to guide his team to consecutive national championships, which had not been done in a decade prior to him. and never get the national recognition because he wasn't known as a tremendous thrower.
Right.
But he was a leader of men, and I think that's what you should gauge a quarterback by, the character that he has and the respect that he gets from his teammates. Tommy Frazier, he punched all the boxes on that, Charles.
Yeah, there were no hanging chads. And in fact, I think they put 55. I think they beat Florida 65 to 20-something for their national championship game. I'll never forget. I thought Florida would hang close with them, but he was just dominant. Davey O'Brien, TCU, needless to say, a trophy presented annually to the best of all the NCAA quarterbacks. You're probably an accomplished quarterback yourself, but even though he played in an era before most of our parents were even born, when you hear about the Davey O'Brien Award, Davey O'Brien still holds the NCAA record for the most rushing and passing plays in a single season. To this day, it still stands. Big C, your thoughts?
You think about that. I mean, the top nation's quarterback
Yep.
always is awarded with the Davey O'Brien Award. But you just talked about two numbers, Charlton, that when we think about the highlights of college football that we get today on a weekly basis,
Yeah.
Davey O'Brien played in an era where there was no television.
Nope.
But to still hold the record, Charlton, for the most running plays and passing plays by a college quarterback in a single season. And think about it, the season now has expanded to, 12, 13
Yeah.
games?
Yeah.
Davey O'Brien played in an era, Charlton, when he only played 9 games.
Yeah.
And he still holds that phenomenal record. We're talking about a great quarterback.
Yeah.
Everybody only wants to talk about what they see on a highlight show on television now, as far as the greatest quarterbacks ever, Charlton.
Yep.
You got to do what they tell you, what you tell them to do all the time. Google it.
Google it.
Find out who are the greatest out there. We just told you that Davey O'Brien, Charlton, has no peers in college football.
Yeah, that's true. And when we talk about Google, sponsor Big C Sports. I believe that's coming, Big C. Honorary mention, Steve McNair, Alcorn State. McNair played at a Division I AA program in the South, Alcorn State, but his highlights were still shown with the big boys during his career. He threw for 15,010 yards, 122 touchdowns in his senior season. Big C. He tossed for 47 touchdowns alone and threw for more than 5,300 yards. He also rushed for 904 yards and 9 touchdowns while finishing third in the Heisman Trophy voting. I'll never forget what he did for the Southern schools in the South, because when they put him on the field, he was as dominant as everybody, even taking the Tennessee Titans to the Super Bowl. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, known as Air McNair, Charlton, Steve McNair was a phenomenal collegiate athlete. And, you know, we talked about Case Keenum passing for 5,000 yards in a season in college. Steve McNair did that feat also, Charlton. But when you talk about the numbers he did as a senior,
Amazing.
passing for 5,300 yards,
Yep.
rushing for another 900 yards, Charlton, and throwing 47 touchdown passes, that's a heck of a career for a lot of college
Yeah.
quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Steve McNair did that in one short season back during when they only had 11-game seasons, Charlton. That's what's so great about some of these quarterbacks that we talked about.
Yeah.
These quarterbacks played in an era, Charlton, where you only had 11 college football games in a season. Davey O'Brien only had 9.
Yeah.
And still holds 2 records that have not been beaten today. And we talked about the phenomenal numbers of Case Keenum.
Yep.
Case Keenum's numbers doesn't beat Davey O'Brien's numbers.
No.
So when you think about these great quarterbacks, and I love that you brought up Air McNair, coming from a historical black college, Alcorn State, playing 1AA football, Charlton.
Yep.
But his numbers were right there with the big boys. So even more than being an honorable mention, Charlton, he deserves to be just part of that class.
I think even more, as I want to just make this statement, because as a person of color, it's a sad dog that won't wag his own tail. Steve McNair, Doug Williams, there's a guy by the name of Tracy Ham that played at Georgia Southern back in the day. You think about guys like Ronald Cunningham that played out at UNLV. There's so many. Tony Rice up at Notre Dame. It was a Donovan McNabb that played at Syracuse. There's so many players over the years as black quarterbacks. You think about what's going on right now in college football. They're still telling Baltimore Ravens pick from last year they want in 2018. They want him to play defensive back. So give me about 30 seconds on the mindset. And Andre Ware did it too. You talked about that. Black men have had to do what white guys haven't had to do. I've never seen, and I know it's happened, they've taken some white kids and say, okay, you're quarterback all your life. We're going to keep you a quarterback even if you're not that good. They've taken guys that were black, that were All-American Heisman Trophy Super Bowl winners, and said, well, we don't know if you can play the position Talk about the mentality they had to have on top of being a great athlete, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, the quarterback position has always been a heralded position at every level of football. They're saying that only intelligence can play that position. And so what they were saying is that African Americans weren't intelligent enough to be leaders of men. The problem is that when you gave them the opportunity, they showed that they were.
Dominated.
And many white athletes were not going to be able to beat them out, Charlton, just because they had such a command of the game.
Yeah.
But it's also that thing, Charlton, that you're more comfortable sitting with the guys that look like you.
Yeah.
These African-American quarterbacks weren't sitting with the head coaches when they were at the dinner table. When they looked across, they saw a kid at home that looked like him. So he felt more comfortable as a coach talking to a guy like he was his son, where you weren't going to get that with an African-American quarterback.
Well, I just appreciate men that fight on, because just like doing Big C Sports, there are times, even when I first got started in broadcast, there were men who would say, well, on the phone interview, they wanted to have you come in and do the read for the show, Big C. Then you show up and they're going, well, let's see. So what do you want to do again? I think we may have that position filled, but you can still leave your resume. Like we already had resume 30 days ago, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I ran across that really a lot when I was younger, because I grew up in that era where the only way you could get in contact was with somebody over the phone. And when you show up,
they're like, what?
And, the thing that I would get when I was younger, Charlton, is that you sound different over the phone. Do I sound different or do I look different?
Yeah.
And, let me know which one it is.
Yeah.
And, because you could articulate, they had a problem with you when you showed up. It's like, you sounded white over the phone. That's basically what they were saying.
Yeah.
You sounded white over the phone, but you're black in person.
It's funny, because I told you this in talks with a lot of Silicon Valley companies really appreciate the growth of Big C Sports. I did a reading for Oracle back in 1998 over in Santa Clara. And I'll never forget, we had great conversation on the phone. I was doing some work with KGO ABC Sports over in San Francisco. And they had me come down because they loved the presence in the background. And I got down there, they had me wait for an hour. And then by the time I did the reading, they said, well, we'll have to get back to you. We had been talking for a good 3 weeks before I went down there. But you got to keep fighting through, Big C. I want to just leave this real quick statement I want to make today before we talk about a few more things. You know how we talk about the 800 hotline number for people going through issues? You can dial 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255 if you need help. Now, at the end of our show, and this is important, especially everyone on the planet has a mother or has had a mother at some time. And we always talk about there's no excuse for domestic violence against anybody, man or woman. But today I was downtown in a major city, Northern California, and I saw this man calling a woman every name in the book that probably wasn't her birth name. White guy, probably 30-something. And I decided, what am I going to do? And I said, do it. I'm telling you why I repeat that number every show, call 911, is because in about 10 seconds, I thought, well, maybe I don't want to be involved with it. But I said, wait a minute. What if that's somebody I care about? I picked up my phone, and I called 911. And they came on and asked me what's the nature of the call. I told them what it was. A man's abusing a woman. I didn't see him slap her, but he was pointing in her face, and he was yelling at her so much you could tell she was intimidated. Long story short, they showed up within about 3 minutes. I told them the woman was white, and she was. I'm just saying that number works. Because I hope that woman got the help that she needed. But I could have been like a lot of passive men and said, well, I don't want to get involved in it. And I just want to know, for people out there, if you see stuff happening, don't sit back and act like somebody else is going to make the call. Make the call, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's an American story that you need to tell, is that you have to help your neighbors, regardless of what they look like. You never know if a situation is going to escalate, but if that situation had escalated and you had not interacted in it, how should you feel as a person? So look, I could have stopped that heinous act from occurring.
Yeah.
It's just like when you introduced the National Suicide Hotline, Prevention Hotline, Charlton.
Yeah.
You have to do that. You have to give people an alternative in life, Charlton, to make better decisions. By you calling 911, who knows what's going to occur with that woman now, but you know that she was safe at that point.
Yeah.
And that's all you can ask as a person,
Yeah.
is that you do your part in society just like you would do to protect someone that you care about.
Yep.
Make sure, even if it's someone you don't know anything about, that they get home safe.
Yep. And so I just encourage men and women, just make the call. You don't have to put hands on somebody. People who are trained to do that, they'll show up, and believe me, any knucklehead chances his tune when it comes to abuse when police show up with guns and tasers. It's just real talk. Big C, I also want to just study on one thing before we go on. I saw a commercial on television, and it was a major car company, and they showed some women. It looked like they had robbed a bank. We talk about protecting people, calling 911, and they used this image of women to sell a car. And it bothered me that all the women had dark hair or either looked minority or very, very, very dark-skinned, suntan white Americans. They didn't have any blonde-haired, blue-eyed women in this nationally known car commercial where they were showing women blowing up a bank and walking out with bags full of money. And they were saying that this car is always ready to perform. And I don't like that, because as a person of color, and I just told you that 911 call I made, the lady got blonde hair. They showed up in about 3 minutes. So when they show this image of women of color or sometimes people of color robbing a bank to get away with something, I don't like that. That was intentionally done. They could have had all white people. The mortgage meltdown was called by white Americans, Big C. It wasn't called by black people. And I don't like when a car company does that. Am I being too sensitive, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you portray images in society, this is the same images that the police see. This is why their reactions are certain ways towards minorities when they walk towards a car. Real life imitates art,
yeah.
and that's what we're getting. Or is it vice versa? Art imitates life.
It's both.
And so when you're getting this portrayal, we see it in the movies. Now we're seeing it in network broadcasting as far as Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
If you portray people of dark complexion as criminals, what is the rest of the society going to look at, and also law enforcement, John?
Yep, and that's a perfect segue. So for Madison Avenue, you got to have more people of color representing what you're doing, because oftentimes mainstream society has shown that it doesn't know or it doesn't care to do the right thing. But if we sit back and don't talk about it, Big C, then how do they know? Because we're always waiting for somebody to do something for us. We got to be able to do it first. I got to bring up this point because it's so important to me. Today, I'm not shocked by anything I see. And we were just talking yesterday about athletes should not be role models, and neither should politicians. But this thing with the New England Patriots, again, I was thinking of Robert Kraft when they said breaking news, New England Patriots. I thought, okay, did they throw out Robert Kraft's case? But he's a white guy. NFL News reported that Patriots safety Patrick Chung faces cocaine possessions. Big C, we just talked about this stuff this week. We just talked about athletes and the PEDs and performance enhancement and whatever they do. But I just want to get your thoughts, because maybe I'm too sensitive. But when it came up that it was Patrick Chung, the media treated it like he's already guilty. Now, he's pushing back and saying that the charges are that's not my stuff. I don't know how that's going to fly. But Robert Irsay with the Indianapolis Colts that you opened my mind to, he had, I think, $25,000 of some illegal substance on him. He's still the owner of an NFL team. Bob Kraft is still going through his shenanigans with the what they call a prostitution ring of minors in Jupiter, Florida. But now they're treating Patrick Chung, and I don't know what the man had, but now they're treating Patrick Chung as if he's already guilty. And how they have, can you just understand what I'm saying? Why are they treating both? We saw one was on tape, one was not. Your thoughts?
Well, the thing with Patrick Chung, Charlton, the product was in his house. That's the problem right there. It's in his house. And you call the police to your house and you got this sitting around there. They didn't arrest him at the time when they saw the product, Charlton. They investigated it.
Yeah.
But also as an athlete, Charlton, or even as an owner, why do you put yourself in this position?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, anybody can put themselves in that position. We always want to be hard on the layman person on the street who is using drugs, Charlton.
Yeah.
We want to give athletes and owner a pass, and, it's an unfortunate situation for them. We start trying to find excuses. I have to look at it from this perspective. What's the law, Charlton? Do you drink and drive? Is drinking and driving legal in America?
No.
No. So you don't drink and drive. So why would you take an illegal substance and have it in your house, knowing you couldn't purchase it legally?
Yep.
So you had to purchase it illegally. You're having to feel that, the situation that you're invincible, you're untouchable because you're a professional athlete. Professional athletes should be held to a higher standard. Why is there not more stories on the news about the positive things they do? But Charlton, they're always putting themselves out there where they're jeopardizing their lives and their careers.
Yeah, it's a dumb thing. Being around Hollywood and entertainers and athletes, I've seen some of that stuff, and people call it, in fact, cocaine, the powder cocaine and the crack form of cocaine, it has two different sentences. One's for primarily white people to get them probation and no incarceration, and the other's been held against minorities to get them into the criminal justice system. We've seen that. So I'm not saying that I'm naive to what goes on when people have money. But the NFL is drugs are omnipresent in our society. People do what they want to do. And I don't want to seem like I'm making it too simplistic here. But the NFL has just endorsed Jay-Z and did a partnership with Jay-Z. He alleged himself that he used to sell drugs. Which kind, we don't know. So how does the commissioner come back and have a straight face and say we're going to have a penalty for people who break the law, and Patrick Chung and Robert Kraft and Mr. Irsay, but we're going to bring on Jay-Z as a mentor for what the black community wants? And I got to I'm all for everybody having an opportunity. But you cannot tell me that just because a person's rich that they have credibility. I knew a lot of people growing up from different walks of life. Some were drug dealers. Some were pimps. Now, some pimps, I think Denzel Washington did a movie called American Gangster. And there was a scene where he came home and talked to his mother. And he said, Mama, you don't have to work anymore. I can take care of you. I can take care of everybody. And she said, I don't want your dirty money. Just because you make money by hurting other people, who knows how many people died because they overdosed on the drugs you sold. I have a relative that's personal to me that passed away because of an overdose. And the drugs were given to her by somebody she knew. Just because that person had money doesn't make them welcome or a paragon of virtue. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, no one ever looks at that, Charlton, from either perspective. Well, when a drug dealer is sentenced and they're saying, well, they're getting harsh sentences because they're a minority, they're still killing minorities, Charlton, whether you do it by your hand or by the product that you're pushing out there. You got to look at the lives that suffer behind every known narcotics dealer in America. And so I've never been empathetic towards somebody being locked up for pushing narcotics because most of them push it on young people who can't afford to deal with it.
That's
Charlton.
right.
They don't have the resources.
That's right.
And so when you talk about different sentences for cocaine versus crack, they're both bad.
Yeah.
But crack is more devastating in life than what cocaine has been. When you think about the harm that it has caused to people, and that most of it, Charlton, has been charged to unborn babies.
Yeah.
So I have no empathy towards somebody being locked up for dealing drugs. I have no empathy for anybody being caught with the drugs, Charlton, saying, well, it's not mine, and
right.
I don't feel that I should be suspended for it. As a professional athlete, Charlton, every team has multiple physicians that you can go to, and you can get any legal prescription narcotic that will give you the same effect as an illegal drug.
Yeah.
You can get that from your team physician. So if you want to put your multi-million-dollar contract in peril because you want to go hang out with your boys that you grew up with, that's always been part of your posse, you want to take care of them, then you do that. And when you lose that $100 million contract, let them support your ass.
Ain't that something? I don't have any sympathy for people pushing drugs on people or whatever's going on. The law has strict rules for that. I want to just touch on real quick. We have this football schedule. It's a light schedule tonight in the NFL, 6 games. But we talk about the expansion of sports. And I love the sports universe because it brings people together. Whoa, Canada, our home and native land. Give me your thoughts. Oakland Raiders, Green Bay Packers, playing in Canada. I think it's great for this to happen. I would love to see it happen in the regular season. I think the Grey Cup, which has been around longer than the Super Bowl, by double time, I think it's been over 105 years. But they're playing the Grey Cup Championship, I think, in November. But to have the NFL show up in preseason, and the CFL is already planned. I think there would be so much interest from Canada just because the NFL's coming. And I want to ask, do you think that they're testing the waters to see if NFL expansion can go into Canada, Big C? Your thoughts?
Charlton, I don't think it is. I think this is just a typical exhibition game. You got to understand that the Buffalo Bills had an agreement for decades with the city of Toronto that they would go up and play a game every so many years in the city of Toronto when they had that Dome Stadium up there. So this is nothing new as far as the NFL venturing into Canada. Canada, I think what you got to look at is at the intimate domain between the two.
Yeah.
Is that the Canadian League has been around well over 100 years. You talked about that championship game. I think they've played it 106, 107 versions of that.
Yep, the Great
Cup. So they've
been
playing a championship game longer than the NFL has been in existence.
Yeah.
And I think it's about protecting each other's product. You know, we know how prominent the NFL is here in the U.S. and how it is disbanded leagues. If you try to go into another country, Charlton, you're going to demolish the league and the employment of those players that have been there forever.
Yeah.
So I think that the NFL is very sensitive to what Canada has up there, Charlton, and is not seeking to go into that country more than just a couple exhibition games here and there. You got to look at the number of U.S. cities that don't have teams, Charlton, that would like to have teams.
Yeah.
And it's going to be hard to take a team that's close to a television market because teams own that. That's the reason why Buffalo has been just going back and forth between Toronto. I think it's a 2-hour drive between the two cities.
Yeah.
And half of that stadium is filled with Canadians every time Buffalo has a home game.
Yep.
So, it would just like being putting a team up in Vancouver and you got Seattle right there. They're going to talk about intimate domain.
Yeah.
The reason why the Chargers were able to come back to Los Angeles and play in the same city as the Rams is because they were in the American League versus the National League.
Yeah.
So that was the difference. Just like when the Raiders went to Los Angeles, it was the National League versus the American League. So it was not a conflicting conference thing. That's what you have to look at in putting teams in certain areas. Is there a conflict in conference, Charlton, and also intimate domain?
Well, that's very well said. NFL cities are already close to Canada TV markets. Seattle Seahawks, Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers, the Detroit Lions, Buffalo Bills. And I just think it's nice when the countries can take their product into other cities. And that's great about the expansion. And speaking of expansion, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker. You can follow on YouTube. If you have a television set, Xfinity Comcast has Big C Sports. Also, the app that I like is Alexa. Say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate all the support from our sponsors. Big C, as we close out our final segment, Major League Baseball, I know the playoffs are a couple of months away, but it feels like we're already there. The Yankees have been beaten up on by the Oakland A's over in Oakland. But Oakland feels that the stadium's not good enough to have a championship team, but they've already jumped on the Yankees in a couple of games. Chicago, also the Cubs been beating up on the Giants, but I won't give out scores. Tonight's schedule, Tampa Bay at Baltimore, Washington at Pittsburgh, Cleveland at the New York Mets, Miami's at Atlanta, Colorado's at St. Louis, you have Detroit at Houston, and Houston got jumped on also for Orlando, got jumped on Big C, Texas at Chicago, the New York Yankees at Oakland, Toronto at the Los Angeles Angels, and matchup games Kansas City at Boston and San Francisco at Chicago. I got to get your thoughts on something. TV needs to know when to take the cut. Reggie Jackson over at the Oakland Coliseum, and they had him on television. You know, he's one of the greatest players of baseball, Hall of Famer. It's just an amazing player with the Oakland A's and also the New York Yankees. They were doing an interview with the great Reggie Jackson, who's in his 70s now. He still looks good. But the one time they put the camera on him, they showed him spitting on the ground. Big C, that's illegal, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's what baseball players do well. And you never know when they're going to let one fly. And Reggie thought that since he was out there on the grass that he was still playing and went back to his old answer.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. But the days of sports is amazing. I know we have a lot of things coming up in sports. We're going to get into tomorrow something that we started last year with Big C Sports. And we talked about high school football Friday Night Lights. We're going to bring that up. The nation's #1 ranked high school football team, Florida St. Thomas Aquinas, is playing the nation, one of the best programs in California, in De La Salle of Concord. Both teams have won over 5 national championships. I want to finish off in Atlanta, Big C. I know when you think of the golf world, we have the FedEx down in, I think it's East Lake Golf Club in Atlanta, and Shuffley right now is -10, as well as Koepka, and then Thomas and McIlroy is also -9. It's big news. Is it $9 million or $15 million to the winner, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, it's a $9 million purse, Charlton, and the winner gets. Well, it's a $15 million purse. I believe the winner gets between $9 and $10 million annuity for winning the tournament, Charlton. But I don't know if the tournament is going to have the luster that it had last year. When we think about that epic finish that Tiger Woods had walking down the final 18th green, Charlton, and that sea of people that overtook him looked like a huge ocean wave of people taking over him down as he went down the fairway, Charlton. One of the more epic moments that we've ever seen in golf, I know, in my time.
Yeah.
But East Lake is always great, Charlton, when you talk about the amount of money that they're paying out to the players.
Yeah, it's a lot. And Atlanta's such a progressive city. Also a city that's had multiple African-American mayors. And I think the largest, busiest airport in the United States of America. So I really appreciate all the great things going on in sports. We talked about some things happening in football, college football. We talked about how everybody's going across the border to do something. When they go north, everything's fair. And when they go south, sometimes people have issues. But I just want people to realize, if you ever see someone in trouble, and even me, I give out that number every day, but it still took me about 10 seconds because I didn't really want to get involved. But something hit my mind. It says, Charlton, just call 911. That's what we always do. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Charlton, what I'm looking forward to is that we're 2 days away now from the opening of kickoff of college football. You talked about some of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history, Charlton, in the early part of the segment of our show.
Yep.
Will we get one of those type of performances this upcoming season in 2019, Charlton, where one of these upstart quarterbacks will propel himself to one of the greatest of all time in college football?
Well, in the words of the great Don Coryell, pass it, young man, pass it. And you can pass it, too, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.